Thank you, Ron. And that interview did not take place in person, correct?
No, it did not.
That was a phone interview, correct?
Correct.
And your attorney was on the line for that, correct?
Correct.
Now, from the beginning of the night on January 28th, your plan was to go home early, correct?
Correct.
You weren't drinking much, correct?
That is correct.
You had to get up early.
Yes.
Correct? And it actually was really early. It could have been as early as 3 a.m., correct?
Correct.
So from the beginning, you knew that you weren't going to get much sleep, correct?
Yes.
And if you were going to get any sleep, you couldn't stay at the waterfall all night, correct?
That is correct.
So you left early.
Yes.
And you planned to go home, get whatever rest or sleep you could get, and then wait for the call to go out plowing, correct?
That is correct.
The plan from the beginning was not for you to leave the waterfall, go to Easton, and then drive back from Easton to Canton to pick up Caitlin, and then take her back to Easton so that you could wait for the call for plowing. That was not the original plan, correct?
No, it wasn't. No,
of course it wasn't. So I apologize, Ron. I withdraw that comment. But the plan changed, correct?
Yes.
And that was because you heard from your girlfriend, Caitlin, correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you a question and hope I get an answer. Do you recall what time it was that she contacted you?
No, I don't recall.
Did anybody instruct you not to talk about any times that anything happened?
Absolutely not.
How did Caitlin contact you that night?
Via text, via phone.
And you were in Easton when she did that, correct?
Yes.
She was at 34 Fairview?
Yes.
And by the way, the snowstorm was no surprise to you that night, right?
No.
I mean, that's why you were waiting to plow, correct?
Yes.
That snowstorm had been forecast.
Yes.
And it had started snowing by midnight, correct?
I don't remember when it started snowing.
But for some reason, Caitlin now needed to get picked up before you went plowing, correct?
Yes.
That meant, despite the fact that you had to get up potentially at 3 a.m., you now had to make the trip back and forth between Canton and Easton a second time, correct?
Yes.
And you considered it to be important enough that you agreed to pick up Caitlin, despite the changing plans, correct?
Correct.
Now, earlier that evening on Friday, January 28th, you made plans to go out with your mom, Nicole Albert, your aunt, Julie Albert, and your boyfriend, Tristan Morris, correct?
Yes.
From the beginning of that night, the plan was for Tristan to go home early, correct?
Yes.
And that was because he had to get up early to plow or shovel, correct?
Yes.
He had to get up really early, correct?
Yes.
The plan was for him to shovel or plow at 3 a.m.?
He was, from what I recall, he was on standby for like 3. It could have been any time after that.
Oh, I see. So it could have been that he had to get up at 3 or maybe a little bit later, correct?
Yes.
And it was for that reason that when he was at the waterfall with you, he only had a couple of drinks, correct?
From what I remember, yes.
And from the beginning of the night, you knew that it was going to be iffy as to whether he would be able to get much sleep at all, correct?
It wasn't really something we discussed.
Well, the reason he was going home early and only having a couple of drinks was to see if he could catch some sleep before what would be a very difficult work morning, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that in order for him to get any sleep, he couldn't stay at the waterfall very long, correct?
Yes.
And that's why he left early.
Yes, he went home to rest. We didn't speak about whether or not he would be sleeping.
It wouldn't shock you if he tried to go to sleep.
No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't.
You stayed believing that Tristan was going to try and rest and sleep, correct?
Yes.
And the plan when he left you was that you wouldn't see him again until after he was done with his plowing that morning, correct?
That's incorrect.
Okay. So is it your testimony that the plan from the beginning was that Tristan was going to drive from Canton to Easton and get some rest, and then drive from Easton to Canton to pick you up so that he could take you back from Canton to Easton? That was the plan?
It may not have been set in stone, but it was definitely spoken about, and then that's what ended up happening. Yes.
Have you ever told anyone that before, Ms. Albert, that the plan from the start of the night was that Tristan was going to make 4 trips total from Canton to Easton, Easton to Canton, Canton to Easton? Have you ever told anyone that before?
I don't remember if I mentioned that to anybody.
That was the first time you've ever said that, just now before this jury. Would you agree with that?
I believe so.
Isn't it true that you decided at 1:45 in the morning that it was important for you to get home?
At 1:45, around that time is when Tristan picked me up, a little bit after that, but I didn't want to get snowed in at my parents' house.
It was important for you to leave 34 Fairview, correct?
I wouldn't say important, but it was something that I wanted to do,
It was
yes.
important enough for you to leave, correct?
Yes,
And you made the decision to have Tristan drive from Easton to Canton to pick you up, correct?
yes.
How far is it from Easton to Canton?
From our apartment in Easton to 34 Fairview Road is about 18, 19 minutes.
Okay, and that's when there's not a snowstorm outside, correct?
Correct.